Welcome everybody to episode 30, number 30, the big 30. For this monumental episode of Meet with Cheese Metaverse Interviews, I have a monumental guest today for you. And I'm your host, LeDrop WithCheese, coming to you live from the Metaverse. Today we have the man, the myth, and the legend, the man who defined the modern definition of the Metaverse. If you don't know who he is, you need to know. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Mr. Will Burns. Thank you so much for being on my show.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, I actually wanted you to be my first guest, but I figured I would get a little traction first before I have a heavy hitter like you come in. So thanks so much, Will. We actually met at earlier this year, January. We met at Move the Needles event. It was a metaverse event, and you were a panelist and I was the MC, and then we partied till like 3 or 4 in the morning.
That was one hell of a party.
Ever since then we've been pals, and then you were a speaker. You were the featured speaker at Meet with Cheese this past NFT.NYC. So it's always good to see your face, man.
Yeah, it was a fun time up there at Versa, right? Yeah. Love that the cheese and the meat was there. So I was waiting for that too. They're like, oh, it's meat and cheese, huh? I get up there and I'm like, I'm just looking for the meat and cheese. I want to make sure he's staying on point.
I know I often choose that option on the menu because people are like, do you have any vegetarian options? And I'm like, cheese?
Cheese is vegetarian. I don't know.
But so
celery.
I think there were some fish items. There were definitely some veggie items as well. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your background and how you went down the rabbit hole of Web3 and haven't looked back.
So I grew up poor in the southern hemisphere, and no, that's true. But I started out in virtual worlds when I was about 15. Actually, I was in high school, and it was just beginning. Like VRML days. And people were wondering what this VR thing was going to be about. And I remember when I was about 15, 16, I was taking radio in school for my radio broadcast license and also multimedia. And I was so bored in my multimedia class because I was so far ahead. I was designing entire games at that point, where they're learning how to animate stick figures. I needed a new challenge. And one day I opened up PC Magazine, because I was maybe being a nerd. And down the middle, it was just, all the stuff about VRML and Virtus VR and active worlds and all this stuff. And I'm like, now that is interesting. So I started getting into it, and I'm like, now let's push this to the limit. So like 5 or 6 years into it, I get to a point where I was pushing those technologies so far that even the company that ran the place thought I was nuts, because I was doing stuff that was never meant to do. Like I was redoing the entire browser they had, I was giving it new features. I was using it in ways you never thought of. I was just maxing this thing out. And I'm like, okay, we hate you. Like, because every time they come up with something, I come up with something and go, oh yeah, I can do that. And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, it's not capable. And I go, watch me. And I just do it anyway. So then from there, I started a company to do R&D and stuff for other companies. And I kind of figured out at that point that this is going to be the future. I went down that road and went, there's something here if it just keeps evolving, And I kept doing that. And I said, there's marketing involved. This is going to be how we're going to interact with each other. There's going to be something here, And imagine if this was in real life too, if we had like augmented reality. And this was all way before the tech was even there. And I'm sitting there thinking about it as part of the research. And I went, all right. Now, at some point, I got involved with Metaverse Roadmap back in 2007. And I was in my early 20s at that point. And they were asking, in their survey for contributors. And I said, all right, I'll contribute from the company, VR5 Online. I said, all right, and I said, what do you think that is? What do you think the metaverse is going to be? And their idea of it was like virtual worlds only. It's like, oh, virtual worlds, this and that, and one place. And I came in, and even back then I said, yeah, I don't think so, Jim. And they went, what do you mean? I went, it seems to me that this is going to be a giant ecosystem, of virtual worlds and related technologies. And they're like, nah, but they put my name on the bottom anyway. They said, thank you for your input, kid. let the big guys handle it. We're good in this. I'm like, okay. Then after that, I got to talking. I was in Second Life for a while. That kind of succeeded after Actfalls. They took over, and it was a big thing in 2008, 2007, all that. I went over there and I hooked up with a marketing company, and Sherry Hall is, wonderful person. She ran Pulse Point Media, and she brought me in. She goes, all right, what do you know about marketing? And I went, not a damn thing. She goes, what do you know about virtual worlds? I went, a lot of things. And she went, okay. And I started out as marketing, and then she realized I was really better at VP of operations, because I knew, the psychology of it so well that it was blowing her out of the water. Like, she would go do one thing, it wouldn't work, and then she'd ask me, and I go, try doing this, and it would just wildly be successful. And she goes, how'd you know? And I go, I did my homework, right? All the way back to like Lucasfilms, Habitat, all the way up to that. So I know what the psychology was. So during that time, I spent with Dr. Gilbert doing Loyola Marymount University's Island in Second Life, helping psychology department, computer science department build educational island for all the students. And in between all that, running the team and all that, getting that built, Dr. Gilbert and I would actually sit down and just talk for like hours about the metaverse, where it was going to go, and what my insights were. And after like a year of that, of me working for him, building all this stuff, come up with these great ideas of how to implement stuff, he sits down, he looks at me one night, he goes, Will, he goes, we've been talking about this for like a year. He's like, and I'm taking notes off of you. He's like, I'm actually a PhD. I'm taking notes off of you. He goes, would you like to write a research paper? And I went, sure, why not? That was like my answer. I was like, sure, why not? I didn't really think I was getting into much, And then Dr. Dionisio got involved from the computer science department, and we all sat down that summer and wrote a paper about 3D virtual worlds and the past, present, future of the metaverse, and going down every little thing, right? And at the end of it all, he goes, well, we're going to go and put it on a smaller journal, and I went, okay, cool. I didn't even really care at that point. I was like, all right, guys, you guys, what you wanted. And he's like, okay. Then like a month later, we get something back from Dr. Dionisio, and he goes, oh yeah, I submitted that to ACM. And Dr. Gilbert like lost his mind. He's like, you did what? He's like, yeah, I sent it to Association for Computing Machinery. He's like, that's the biggest journal in the world. He goes, yeah, I know. Because I think we've done that good of a job. And Dr. Gilbert was like really nervous. He's like, I don't know if we did that good of a job. He's like, don't worry about it. Well, it turns out, according to ACM, we had written what they considered a near perfect paper. It had actually there was like two things that the peer reviewers wanted done. It was like 2 sentences. We changed it, it was done. Usually that stuff takes like 18 months of back and forth. And we had 2 requests, and they're like, every reviewer was like, yeah, just perfect paper. So we just got published immediately. And like, yeah, we're good. So from that point on, I got invited to be part of IEEE's Virtual World Standard Group. And I started out as an object interoperability guy from that one, leading that team. And then at some point I got bumped up to vice chair, because I was just kind of throwing everything all over the place. I was just, managing everything. So I did that. After my stint with vice chair by IEEE Virtual World Standard Group, I went on to do another project called Parallel Worlds as a private project, which was essentially what we're doing now in the industry, which was I was figuring out how to do a 3D twin of the world and marry it to VR at the same time, figure out what was needed to do that. Now, this is before we had any of the technology we have now. So I was literally taking off the shelf parts, and I was just Frankensteining everything to make this headset. And it was a big headset, but we got it, and it kind of worked for the most part, and it demonstrated what I was talking about. But the most important part of the project wasn't the headset or the prototype. It was just that list of things, that laundry list, that shopping list I made up of technologies that needed to exist and what and how we're going to get there. And then I took that and went, well, I can see that, Qualcomm's going to be the leader. And they're like, how do you know? I'm like, call it a hunch. They're going to make XR chips, call it a hunch. This is years ago, before they even thought about it, So I would take a Qualcomm chip. This is on my shopping list. They're like, why? I'm like, trust me. Technology is going to get better and better. So all this stuff I've done, right down to, recently, Matthew Ball's book, that on stage. Matthew Ball's
Yep.
book. Now, if you haven't read it yet, definitely read this thing, because if you don't know anything about the metaverse, this is probably going to be your Bible. So it's the metaverse and how it will revolutionize everything. Between that, I was part of the Solipsis Decentralized Metaverse, which is actually a great paper if you're into like academic stuff. But at the end of it all, I got down to SuperWorld. I come out of retirement after a couple of years. I was kind of under the radar, and then worked for SuperWorld for a few years, and here I am today. I'm just kind of that dude. I'm just kind of like the Big Lebowski of the metaverse at this point. I'm just kind of sitting back in my bathrobe, and it seems like I don't have much to say, but then it kind of comes true. So it is what it is. This is my history, man.
Yes, I appreciate that, because even though we've hung out a few times, I didn't get that unabridged version of how your progression was from your words.
There's
So
stuff in between. There's stuff in
yeah.
between. I found myself working with NASA for a while on a Journey to Mars project, which got renamed to Deep Space Blue. I was part of the SOCOM stuff with Talos, which was trying to U.S. military trying to build an Iron Man suit for real. That was interesting. I'm not going to go into details for obvious reasons, but interesting nonetheless. I found myself in very strange rooms for no apparent reason, because like I worked with Atari for a while, and it was by request from one of their guys that was working there. He brought me in, and the entire point of it was just for me to assess the entire company and what they're going to be doing and why. Can I guess what they're going to do? And I said, yeah. I came up with like a 10-step thing of what they're going to do. And it took them 10 years to do it, but they did it exactly in the order I knew they were going to do it. So I worked for Sears corporate for a while. And that's where I kind of wrote the zero barrier retail report for the future 2020. And I said about 2020, you'll start seeing zero barrier retail. I described that as, walk in, grab what you want, walk out. And at the time, 2015 or so, I was told I was a complete lunatic and it's impossible. And then, within a year or so, Amazon actually started working on it for real. It now is Amazon Go. So they did essentially what I thought they were going to do. But I don't think the stores, in that case, the stores aren't going to be widespread. I think they're going to make a turnkey solution out of it. So every store will be Amazon Go capable. That's your future prediction right there. So I've had a really weird and interesting history. I kind of like get a call every once in a while, and they're like, hey, you want to be in this room? And I go, sure, why not? It's like, I don't know what you want from me, but I tend to add value, so let's do it. It's been a weird ride, man, but I'm all for it.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like because of your passion for innovation and technology and how it affects humans, that psychology you said, that has put you at the forefront of the thought leadership of how the future is going to embrace and leverage this for the betterment of humanity. It's really cool that we got to meet and that we're still friends and we're talking now. And speaking of now, aside from being the Big Lebowski slamming White Russians, I think he drank 22 in that movie, if I'm not mistaken.
I think I could drink 22 White Russians. You guys got me pretty slammed at the house thing, the custom house. Yeah. I got pretty slammed on Hennessy. I need to lay off that stuff. You guys are dangerous when it comes to an open bar.
It's why people don't do it very often, because it's open and we don't have good self-control at times. But nowadays, you are still maintaining the OzoCraft Remix texture pack for Minecraft, right?
Yeah, actually, interesting story there. For years, I played Minecraft, and that's seems frivolous, in the beginning when you hear it, like, what the hell does he do playing Minecraft? I play Minecraft for the obvious sake of playing it, but as a metaverse guy, as definition dude, they go, what are you doing here? Like, don't you have anything better? And I go, oh, there's plenty of better stuff. I hang out in that Second Life and all that stuff too. But here's the thing, I happen to have the texture pack from 2014 or something, way back in the day, and I just still had it. I kept using it. then people kept asking me for it because I kept updating it myself, because the person who had it updated, who created originally, disappeared. They dropped it off to somebody else, and that somebody else got busy and they couldn't do it anymore, and it just kind of went the wayside and nobody had access to it. And then I happened to have it, and I was like, well, I've been updating this thing for like 5 or 6 years for myself, and I'm getting tired of people asking me. So I'm gonna go put it on CurseForge, for everybody. And I just brought it back, and it's got like 40, 50,000 downloads at this point, climbing. It's just going. So I'm happy about that. But the bigger picture was the reason why I did it, and the reason why I continue to do it is because part of the idea of the metaverse itself is that everyone is a consumer and a creator at the same time. And Minecraft is a perfect example of that, of a company that creates a baseline of a system, a game in this case. But what really makes it shine is that all of the people out there create these mods for this game. They create like the ability to sit down, they create like dragon mods or new animals or whatever what's going on. All these mods come in to make it better. Then you have an entire system of like people who create texture packs to make it better, and shaders. The reason that they add shaders now is because originally, if I remember correctly, somebody had said, you should add shaders, and I remember Mojang at the time said, oh, that won't be possible in Java, and somebody went and proved them wrong. One of the modders went out and proved them wrong and made like Sonic Ether's unbelievable shaders or something, and showed that they could do amazing shaders with like graphics and lighting and near path trace lighting and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, I guess we can do that. And that's the beauty of the metaverse, is that while your team may not be able to do everything, if you trust the community that you're building with to actually help you build, they will do amazing things together to create it to be bigger than the sum of its parts. They will create all these things and make it 10 times better if you let them. And so as part of that, that mentality, the reason I play Minecraft is because of that mentality, because I see such great modifications. I see mods and mini maps and whatever else, just enough inventory and yada yada. And I go, this is a community falling in love with this idea of a game and making it 100 times better, 1,000 times better together, because Mojang trusts the community enough to let them mod the hell out of it and go nuts. Then you'll go from a 16 by 16 texture, very basic kind of game, to all of this stuff. Like I've seen 20 texture packs that go up to 2048 resolution and high resolution real life level of graphics, which obviously would burn out most cards unless you got like RTX ridiculous kind of cards. But they show you can do it. They get to like real life level graphics because they can. This is something the game was never meant to do, but they're doing it. And because of that, I take this model, and I wrote something on LinkedIn earlier a couple of days ago about literally this, about everything in that picture of me sitting on the docks in Minecraft. Everything in that picture was relevant. Everything in that picture was modifications by the community. I wouldn't be able to sit on a dock if somebody hadn't made a mod to allow me to sit. It wasn't actually in the game. Somebody put a modification. The textures, the graphics, it wouldn't be that way if I didn't make that texture pack to use. It would be something else. It would be very basic looking. The very lighting itself, the water itself, those are shaders. And somebody went out there and made shaders for this. They wouldn't be there as good as it is unless the community got involved. And the community did get involved. And then we take this mentality and we put it to the rest of the ecosystem. And we say, it's not about what we dictate. That's one thing. We give a baseline, say this is what we're starting with. But we have to be open enough to trust our community to help, to be part of this, creation process. And if anything, try to allow them to, to foster that with everybody. That's the ones who win. The ones who come in and try to dictate the message are going to lose every time.
Yes, agree with you wholeheartedly, man. The metaverse is something that your original OG definition that I still reference when I do presentations, I quote you in them. I meant to tell you that I gave one presentation where I was like, look at what Wilburn said. This is your definition of the metaverse. But that was a while ago. you know? And so my question is, what is the metaverse to you?
You know, I narrowed it down to about 3 sentences or so. You know, the original one I wrote was like 3 paragraphs because, you know, IEEE and all that. You have to be very verbose for academia. You know, it's got to be like, you know, 20 pages long and go into detail. I narrowed it down to crayons. You know, I busted out the crayons and got it simplified for everybody and said, generally speaking, the metaverse is not a single place or location in the digital world. Essentially, it is the ecosystem by which AR, VR, and supporting technologies come together to create spatial computing platform. Now, what I mean by that, we can obviously agree on the AR and the VR part, you know, but then there's a lateral technologies section of that sentence, which I put in there as a wild card. It's a tacit admission that there are so many use cases of spatial computing that we'll never be able to say them all. You'll never understand them all. It includes stuff like artificial intelligence and SLAM algorithms, computer vision and robotics and, you know, all this stuff. And because of that coming together to make these new ways of life, ways of communication, ways of creation. A good example is AI now. We see DALL-E 2 and, you know, Midjourney and even better stuff. You know, the first thing I said when I saw DALL-E 2 was next up is 3D, you know, text to 3D. And I went, oh, is that possible? That will be possible. And a month later, somebody did it. And I went, there you go. I said, next up is text to video. And I went, oh, and I went, a month later, there it was, text to video company. I said, next up. And they're like, what? I'm like, this is leading up to something I said, you know, next up, eventually, you're going to have that, you know, text to, you know, AI TV channel. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you can talk to your computer now. So why don't you talk to your TV? One day you're going to look at your TV. It's going to be a blank screen. It's going to ask you, what do you want to watch? And you can literally tell it anything. You can say, I want, you know, a cross between I Love Lucy and, you know, I Love Lucy and the Fast and the Furious. And I'll go, okay. And it'll just come back in like 20, it's like, give me 20 minutes. I'll generate some episodes for you. And you'll just be watching Lucy driving, you know, high speed because it can do that. Not now, but at some point, the evolution is so fast that won't be a problem. We're already there now to an extent where you can have AI generated video. You have deep fakes that are so good that, you know, America's Got Talent has got these people on there now that are, you know, deep faking Simon Cowell singing and Mike, you know, and Elvis Presley and all the judges. And it's almost flawless. You can tell a little bit, but it's pretty damn close. And I'm going, right. And that's like 2 papers to us in academia. That's about 2 papers down the line before it becomes indistinguishable. You know, so I look at it and go, this future is coming at us fast, but it's really about spatial computing. No one location. It's about the ecosystem of all these technologies coming together and interacting with us in ways that we couldn't before. You know, whether you're talking to a robot or your computer or, you know, driving in Tesla cars that drive themselves, all that stuff uses spatial computing. So this is what it really means when I say the metaverse. You know, this is the modern version of it, something that Stevenson could never in his wildest dreams imagine happening. And he himself admitted it. He couldn't see that coming prior to the internet. Now that he sees it, and the internet is here and it's evolved to what it is, the sky's the limit. And now we can say, if I say it's just spatial computing and it's an ecosystem of it, you start going down a rabbit hole in every direction forever. And it's fun to do, but you need to put a stop on it sometime and say, okay, let's go to bed tonight and get some sleep because we'll be here forever.
Yeah, well, that's a great definition and you encompassed a lot there, but I agree. It's the metaverse isn't Facebook or one specific game or one world, virtual world that people hang in. It's an ecosystem and it's growing, like you said, it's growing faster than we can keep up with at this point.
It's going exponentially based on Kurzweil's accelerating law of accelerating returns. You know, we're at that bend in the hockey stick now where we're starting to see, yeah, up until this point, it's been going nice and slow, linear, and then it's going little by little up. But we're at, you know, the law of accelerated returns, you know, from Ray Kurzweil, where it's about to go like this and hit that hockey stick straight up. And we're noticing how fast it is. And I'm saying, you know, everybody's betting on 5 or 6 years from now or 20 years from now. And I'm saying at the rate it's going, it'll be like a fraction of that at the rate of advancement. It's just going to go. It's going to explode everywhere.
Yes. And I feel like we're at the beginning of that for sure. Speaking of academia, you authored a research paper back in 2013 called 3D Virtual Worlds in the Metaverse. How would you say some of the theories and analysis is held up in that paper to here we are 9 years later?
About 90% accurate so far, which is on par for me. You know, we do have, you know, the rise of teledildonics. That was an entire section, you know. Years later, after that paper, about 5 or 6 years later, people thought I was nuts until you get the Second Life and realize there's strippers in there with Loven's remote dildos hooked up to their tip jars. And they go, "You thought I was joking, huh?" I'm like, "Teledildonics, it's going to be a thing." And they went, "Okay." There's other things too involved. You know, there's like, you know, what it means, what the structure would mean. You know, I guess it's a very good paper if you want to read it. But at the end of it, the only thing is that there's a version at the end that said there's going to be hybrid decentralization is likely the key to concurrency. You know, and we're finding out now that it's actually true. Like a lot of companies are looking into it and are realizing, okay, we actually do need to do this. I can't remember the different companies, but there's a few companies that have versions of that took that kind of research and went and tried to do it, and they realized, yes, it does work. They get like 100,000 or more people in one spot without crashing. And there's other places like Ready Player One, RP1 is, you know, doing something from the ground up, you know, to wholly optimize it to get that high concurrency going. So it turns out that those predictions were more or less on mark.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me either. And hey, I'll take a 90%, man. You know, that's still an A in most institutions nowadays.
I'd say
So
90% for the future, because generally speaking, even in the 10% that was wrong, quote unquote wrong, a lot of times it wasn't really wrong. It was just I misjudged how it was going to go, like, but not what was going to happen. It was more like, how is it going to actually play out, or how would it be implemented, you know? But I had a very good idea at the time. You know, I knew that at some point we're going to have, you know, these intermediary film on the glasses to, like, you know, to block out light and do all that stuff for RGB masking and all that. And that was like 5 years ago. I was mentioning that. I said, yeah, that's what we need. And at the time, people thought I was nuts back then. And then Magic Leap went and did it on their version 2. They actually have, you know, that middle layer. That was exactly what I was describing, RGB mask. And I went, see, you know, I don't know exactly how it's going to work out. It's like saying going back in time and trying to explain how a VCR works. You know, most people couldn't, or a DVD player or something. You know, I can give you the general idea of what it's going to be, you know, but I can't tell you exactly how to build one. So like in that 10% gray area is where you get that I really don't know how a blue light laser works. You know, but I know it's in there somewhere.
I don't think anyone's ever going to figure out how a blue light laser works unless it's like lights like this where I'm trapped in the metaverse, you
I
know.
actually do, believe it or not, I actually do know how a blue light laser works. It's a for a DVD player and all that, or a Blu-ray player. There's actually one version of blue, the color blue, on the spectrum that you can't see. There's a hole in your spectrum in your eyes. There's like one little tiny version of blue you can't actually see. It's invisible to you. And that's the version of blue that they use for the laser. You can't see it.
Oh, interesting. You learn something new every day, you know. I appreciate
Biology is weird. Biology is weird, man. Like the brain takes a lot of shortcuts and hacks on what you see in the world. So a lot of what you see isn't really what you see. It's what your brain puts composites together for you and then tells you what it is.
Yes, that I've heard that before somewhere. Maybe a psychology book, a therapist, something like that. But yes,
The beauty of
it's
that is that, you know, in VR and virtual worlds, you know, we use that all the time. It's, you know, exploiting human perception. You know, like we know how we see things or how we perceive things, so we exploit human perception all the damn time in virtual reality and augmented reality, virtual worlds. We use that to our advantage. So we know, like, you know, we know how your eye sees things, so we don't have to draw the whole thing, which is why you get foveated rendering, because we know we can blur everything else out except for exactly where you're looking and give a high detail. Everything else we can lower the resolution, you never notice, right? Unless you're, we just change the high resolution wherever you're actually looking. So we know how to exploit human perception all the time. We do it very well. Just like AI can interpolate, video games on a VR headset, and then you'll never notice. It just looks like it's smoother. We can send half the data and get double the resolution, all that stuff. So that's like a whole section of the metaverse or VR synthetic environment is exploiting human perception. That's one of my favorite things of the industry, is looking at how we can exploit that for the benefit of everybody.
Exploitation by Will Burns, the next research paper coming to you, folks.
Not exploitation like you're thinking, but exploiting human perception. I don't want to be going. I don't want to be going the way of Jeffrey Epstein here. Come on, easy there, buddy. we gotta qualify this real quick before I get in trouble.
It's all good, man. No, I know you're a good guy. I'm just talking about, like exploitation in big letters and of human perception in tiny letters. So
tiny letters. That's a good way to get canceled real quick.
Yes, we don't want that for anyone on this interview right now. So as far as your future visions go and leveraging technology, you did make a really fascinating post a couple of days ago as well. And anyone who is not following Will Burns or is connected to him on LinkedIn, you should absolutely follow him. He gives amazing insight on his experiences, what he sees, and what the future holds. So I love all your posts, man, because I always learn something. But when it comes to education and technology, you posted something about having a school experience where it's like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but you're doing that through VR
or AR, most likely AR at this point. But it's like, imagine going, what would we know that the more immersed you are in the actual environment, the higher the retention rate. We get to about an 80% retention rate when you get to full immersion. That's why we have field trips to Liberty Science Center, and we go to Civil War reenactment areas and all that, so we can interact with people who are playing the part to the hilt and get a feel for what it was like back in those times, right? Now, if you can take that to the nth extreme, and why couldn't we have a pair of glasses at some point in the near future where kids can go and have their chance to debate Socrates, or learn of philosophy, or learn about the life of Billy the Kid while trying to learn, see if you can outgun him in the street. That might be an extreme. Maybe you don't want the guns in school, but you get the point. You can go back in time and and let's say you have a version of Jurassic Park that's safe to actually wander around and get a feel for the dinosaurs and how massive they really are. Instead of just looking at the bones, you can actually interact with them and learn about that. You can bring all this stuff to life, and at that point, education is going to look like Disney World to these kids, and they're going to like fight each other to go to school, because every day is a new place. Everything is like, today we're going to the moon, today we're going to Mars, today we're going back in time, today we're doing this, it's going to be like never ending Disney World, and they're never going to want to get enough. It's going to be what Epcot Center should have been.
Yes, I agree with that. And companies are starting to create curriculum for programs like this that you can use like with an Oculus and experience the space station, the International Space Station. But I would love to see it where, like what your vision is, where it's kids are fighting to go to school and play with this technology and just actually learn something while they're immersed and not just reading or looking at bones. So yeah, man, I can't wait for it. Blockchain is like freedom, and gives people the ability to do whatever they want and reinvent themselves. Just so many positives. One other thing that you've done recently, or you were recently acknowledged or cited in Matthew Ball's The Metaverse book. So what was some of the words that were cited in that?
Well, that was first was the definition, and then after that, was citing stuff like the metaverse, meta galaxy, meta, the stages of the metaverse, and how to get there. And a lot of it was just A lot of it was just going down the line and figuring out how do we get to metaverse, right? And originally it was just a place, so one thing I realized was that originally all the cyberpunk books always counted as their own separate place, but nothing bigger than it. And it didn't jive with me. I said, if I choose one like Neil Stevenson, then I have to omit everything else. What about Shadowrun or Neil Gaiman? What about all this stuff? Mona Lisa Overdrive. What about all these different versions? Do I have to omit them? I said I wouldn't do anybody justice if I picked one. And then I started thinking, what if they all just existed in a bigger system that was the metaverse? That made more sense because then everybody could call those places the metaverse. And then I kind of went from there, and during Solipsis, Decentralized Metaverse, after Metaverse Roadmap, they came to me for as part of INRIA and said, hey, would you mind giving us a definition? I went, sure. And I come up with a slide for them and just kind of went from metadata, meta world, meta galaxy, metaverse, and I said, and I kind of gave some idea of what that would mean. A metaverse would be all these meta galaxies, all these meta worlds, all these whatever together, right? Going down the line. But even since then, because they're talking virtual worlds only, even since then, I've kind of modified it before I got to IEEE. When I got to IEEE, I modified it further and went supporting technologies too. So it's not just virtual worlds. But at the baseline of all these technologies is still that spatial computing structure. So it's still technically a virtual world with all these technologies together. So that was kind of where he was citing in the book on that. It was like me breaking it down of the stages of where you're at. And a lot of it came down to one thing I noticed in the INRIA paper is when I said that, Second Life wasn't even a metaverse. I said it's somewhere in meta galaxy range because it's actually one world. So it might even be a meta world to meta galaxy ish, So it doesn't even reach that high. And they're like, oh, I'm like, but it doesn't need to, it's a metaverse destination. And that's good enough. If we understand the actual language of it, then who the hell wants to be the whole metaverse? Like that's something that Roblox found out the hard way, when they said, oh, we're a metaverse. And I replied back to them, no, you're not, and you don't want to be. They said, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I went, you're literally telling the guy who wrote that definition you don't know what he's talking about. Okay. I said, all right, fine. And about a month later, they got in deep trouble because they found out that in Roblox, there's a bunch of strip clubs and BDSM clubs showing up with these kid blocky characters on stripper poles and everything. And they got in trouble for it. I replied back, still want to be a metaverse? Do you want to be the whole thing? Or do you want to just stay in your lane? Do you want the responsibility of being everything that could ever happen in 3D? Do you want that responsibility? Because bad things happen. There's drug dens, there's RPGs in there, there's sexual role play, there's strip clubs. Do you want that responsibility in a kid's game? Or do you just want to stay in your lane? It's a not bad thing to just be the best at what you're doing in your little section of the metaverse. Be a destination and be happy about it. Don't try to be the whole thing because it takes a responsibility you're not prepared for. It takes a level of things that are going to happen in your system you're just not prepared for at that point. And if anything, go to Second Life and find out. Like they found out over 20 years before you all got into it what kind of stuff happens. That's why they have a rating system in SL. They say there's general, there's moderate, and then there's adult. They split it up on purpose because they know there's some serious stuff going on in there that are adult only. They stopped trying to police it and just said we're going to just separate it from each other. But Roblox is in no position to be the whole metaverse. Now, if they're freaking out because there's kids, because they got kids in strip clubs, building strip clubs and BDSM dungeons with collars and stuff, it's like, yeah. It's like, do you still want to be in the metaverse? No, I didn't think so. Don't want to be, man. Just stay in your lane. Everybody stay in your lane. Like Facebook. I remember somebody asked me if I was worried about Meta being the entire metaverse. And I went, why do you assume they're going to be the whole metaverse? And you're like, well, they renamed their company. I'm like, that's not, no, like just because you renamed it something doesn't make it true. And they're like, well, aren't you worried about it? I'm like, no, because here's the thing. Meta's going to find out they can't friggin' do it. You can't be the whole thing. Nobody can be the whole thing. Tim Sweeney said it. Nobody should be the whole thing. Well, Meta's in that position now where they're trying to be the whole thing, and then they're backing off. They're being part of an ecosystem now. They're being part of the open open XR movement. They're being one of many. They're playing nice because they have to. They realize they can't do it all on their own. And all these other companies are realizing it too. And I said, give some time. All the AOLs and the Prodigies and the CompuServes of this phase will realize they can't go it alone. They have to go to a bigger ecosystem. They have to collaborate with each other. And that's where we're at now, where Meta is starting to realize, okay, we really can't tackle this whole thing on our own.
How do you think their approach has gone so far, specifically?
Disastrously. Like, honestly, look, the headsets are great. That was the one saving grace. The headsets are great. The technology and the hardware is great for what it is, right? The execution of the internals, not so great. Even the employees, from what I understand, won't use Horizon. And when I saw Horizon originally, I went in there with my own headset. I know Zen. I don't know if you talked to Zen or not, but Zen gave me a tour and he goes, well, you come back in. And I went, never. He went, why? I said, because this is like walking around Second Life 20 years ago when they just had the prems, just had the first beginnings. It's very primitive. He goes, yeah. I go, we're 20 years down the road. This is unacceptable from a multi-billion-dollar company to offer Fisher Price. We're going to bring the metaverse, but brought to you by Fisher Price. It's not. No, like we're better than this. We have NVIDIA over there coming up with nanite technology and photorealistic and all this other stuff. And over here we got like the Yugo of friggin' race cars. It's like, no, that's not. No, like, you try again. And it's a bad sign when even your employees won't use the thing they're making. You got to like force them to use it. Or like, you got to use it. It's like, no, we don't. It's horrible. You're the one who wanted it, boss. We made it for you, but we don't want to use it because it's that crappy. I understand. But at that point, if you're like Zuckerberg or something, you should be like, all right, tell you what, man, let's like make this better. Like, how would you guys want this? Like, start listening to your employees. Go, how would you want this to be? Because clearly the dictation mode is not working. Dictating how it's going to go isn't working for us.
Yeah, maybe ask the community, allow them to build, to make things better, decentralize, like all these things that everyone else is doing. And, as you said, Horizon is the Yugo of race cars. You heard it first from
you see Yugos coming out on the racetrack, you just start laughing, He's like, no,
unless it's like some sort of a marketing gimmick, you know what I mean? Like,
sure. Like, you gotta be a joke, man. You're just waiting for clowns to jump out of that car is what you're doing. Like, no, you can't be serious, right? You look at it and go, look, I understand the premise of being able to build stuff easily and all that, but so did Second Life 20 years ago, 18 years ago. So you're like lifting pages from 20, almost 20 years ago and reapplying it today and expecting it to, make an impact. It's like, the hardware is great. The games that are on this there by third parties, more or less, are great. They show what it can do. You, on the other end, as a company, are putting up trash. You're not really putting your best foot forward. Everybody else is putting its best foot forward. And, the side quest, apps and stuff like that are really pushing the limit of what this thing could do and showing innovation, all that, while Facebook's over, kind of on a merry-go-round. They're like, hey, look at our thing. And it's like, no, your employees don't even want to use this thing. And they're like, oh, we're going to go we're going to go hook up with Microsoft and we're going to use it for enterprise. It's like, you were really trying to get people to use this Horizon thing, aren't you? You're really pushing for it, aren't you? You're trying. You want them to get it for work, right? You want to, like, hey, we can now use, Office 360, 365 or whatever. It's like, really? This is like where we're at now. We could do so much better, I think. And these companies are kind of like, I don't know. I look at it and say, like, I think they're copying the homework from 20 years ago. And they think they understand it, and then they go and do it, and then it doesn't work out the way they think it was. Because the difference is you can lift the homework all you want, or repeat what a lot of us are saying. Tony Parisi included, we've had that discussion where like, businesses have like literally lifted his exact, rules of the metaverse into their own pitch decks as if they're, with no citation, no nothing. And he's like, hello, I wrote that. What are you guys doing? All right. And I've caught people doing that to my work too. And I go, yeah, it sounds brilliant, but I liked it better when I said it first. Like,
Yeah.
nice try. Nice try, man. Like you can take the sound bite, but what you don't get is the understanding. And that's what a lot of these companies ended up doing, was they were taking what these academics were saying about it all and how it would work and going, yeah, okay, we get it, right? We get the gist. And we're like, no, I don't think you do. I wouldn't run off that cliff. Okay, you're gonna run off the cliff then. We wait for them, and then it goes off script, and they go, wow, what do I do now? And we all just go and zip our lips, and we go, I don't know, you figure it out. You told us we didn't need us. You know it all. Go for it. Come on, let's see you do it. And they just go right into a brick wall, and we go, now, at some point, you're going to listen to us, not just me, but academics in general that have been in this industry for 30 years. One day, you're going to listen to us, and you're going to go, all right, we can't just run off with this and throw $1 billion at it. We need to actually understand it, and we don't, but you guys do. So, what do you see that we don't? That's where it needs to get to. Slowly
Yes.
we're getting.
Especially in America, we need to get back to trusting the professionals to guide us with the information that they have vastly above what we have. Let's just listen to professionals. It seems very cool.
It's like a reasonable thing. It's like, I don't personally, I come across as Big Lebowski. So like, I'm the most unassuming person in the room. It's like, really, that guy he's really that dude? It's like, yeah, he doesn't even seem like it. It's like, but trust me, if you get into a deep conversation with that guy, you're going to be there for hours. You're going to blow your friggin' mind, but he's the most unassuming person in the room. I'm more like laid back, country boy sort of stuff. You never guess I've done what I've done in my career. And that's on purpose, but people underestimate that. And they go, okay, we get it, we understand. And I go, I don't think you do. I don't think you do, buddy. And I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm like, no, we're marketing professionals. We know. I'm like, okay. Then they end up with like Walmart. You saw that, right? With the Walmart thing and
Walmart,
Roblox, and like the guy shows up and it's like, yeah, we got it, we understand, and it's just Kathy Hackle. No offense, Kathy, but you stole a page from 20 years ago and expected it to work. We've been through that. We were through that already once. We found out what happens when you build islands unto yourself and nobody shows up. It becomes a ghost town. Well, that's what happened with Walmart. They built this giant friggin' island and whatever in Roblox. In their opening day, they had, I would assume, one of their executives come out on a stage in Roblox, and I don't even think it was that. I don't think it was him. I think it was an intern driving that avatar with a pre-recorded voice of that guy, just pre-recorded, spitting it out. The reason I say that is because the avatar went on stage, and there's literally one person in the entire audience, one, and that avatar on stage was addressing it as if there's a crowd of children waiting to go. Like, now everybody go and play, blah, 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 and everyone. I'm like, there's one kid in that audience. There's one person. I don't even know if it's a kid. It could be one of your employees recording this, but there's literally nobody else here. Who are you talking to? You were completely unaware to the point where you phoned this in. That's not how you do this. You couldn't read the room because you're not even there to read the room. You're just playing a recorded audio that you made in your spare time on an avatar. It's like, you can do better. We can do better than this.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, man, because the reality is, if we're talking about metaverse and in real life, that's Walmart, or what they're looking for is to have a metaverse presence somewhere. And I know for myself personally, anytime I hear someone say, we need to go to Walmart, or I have to go to Walmart, let's go, I cringe and I like avoid it like the plague. So if you're like, hey, let's go to Walmart land in Roblox, I'm still cringing. I don't want, no.
You're cringing. See, you're cringing, I'm cringing, but think of the kids. The kids in Roblox can see through this faster than we are. They're like, you never catch me. You won't catch me dead at this place. What are you talking about? They see right through it faster than we do. We're like, come on, kids. And they're like, no. They just walk away.
think the
Gen Z is a
avatar,
lot faster at the BS. Yeah, they get past it real quick. They're like, no, not even going to bother with it.
I think the avatar had like a fist up and just one little digit that popped up and then walked away and left Walnut Land.
Probably. Probably. I mean, that's the thing. You're like, oh, come on, we're going to onboard you to like consumerism. And the kids are like, no, we're not interested. You know, and
Yeah.
you're like, how come nobody's showing up? And it's like that Steve Buscemi, you know, that meme with Steve Buscemi where he's like all dressed up as a teenager. He's like with the skateboard. He's like, how are you doing? You know, my fellow teenager. Just like, get the hell out of here with that crap, man. You guys are missing the point.
Yeah. I mean, there could have been so many other softer entry points that were less cringeworthy.
Cringeworthy. Yeah. Even Theo Priestley was like, what the hell did I just see? And I'm like, we're just riff on. I'm like, hey man, it wasn't me. He's like, it wasn't me either. He's like, I didn't. He's like, I would never told him to do that. I'm like, I know who did. It's Kathy. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you, man. That was a multi-million-dollar flop.
Yes, I agree. But I'm also curious. Like, I have an Oculus. I play it from time to time to escape reality. You know, what are some of your favorite games that you like to play?
I'm gonna laugh. I play Super Hot VR. It's favorite game, hands down. I mean, uh, Damio, I like. And I haven't had a chance to get into it, but it looks amazing. Multiplayer tabletop RPG kind of thing. Love it. It sounds like amazing. Aside from that, you'd be amazed I don't spend as much time in VR as people think. Um, it's hard to say. I don't put the headset on as much as people think because I try to balance my life between analog and digital. So I spend more time in analog, and then every once in a while I'll jump into digital stuff. You know, it's kind of like work-life balance or digital life balance. You know, so
Like,
I'm more prone to play, you know, Nintendo or Super Nintendo games, or you know, indie games in 2D or something like that, you know, or Minecraft, or jump into SL, you know. And once in a while, I'll throw the headset on. But as of this point, I don't really see a reason to myself. I haven't seen the killer app yet. I've seen like Half-Life Alyx, great game, absolutely fantastic, you know. But you know, Vader Immortal, obviously, those things are great, but there needs to be more, you know. And I think it's going to hinge on whether we can, you know, whether there's a better version of Horizon, you know, one that actually meets the expectations.
yeah, agree. Yeah, I just play Oculus just to like shoot other people in like first person shooter games, really. I was in the army, so you know, I still want to defend myself in a safe environment that's gamified. So it works out for me when I want to shoot kids in the paintball game and they all team up. They all have headsets. I'm going lone wolf in there, just trying to kamikaze everyone. Sometimes I get 30 plus kills in the paintball game.
Good question. Is it possible for you to pause the video recording for a minute?
Uh,
No, it's because it's such a nebulous and deep topic that, you know, I spend hours upon hours in you know, Twitter spaces just going down these rabbit holes with groups of people. And we're still not done. It's like a year later, we're still going down these rabbit holes discussing different implications, human condition. We're going through everything. And it's like getting a straight answer is gonna be hard for anything. You know, there's no real message other than this is what it is. At the end of the day, it's, you know, human condition just as much of anything. You know, togetherness, the collaboration, all that stuff is true. But to be real, it's an understanding. You know, it's an inherent understanding is what the metaverse really is. It's a human condition. It's technology. It's spatial. It's about everything, right? And there is no real way to foresee everything. There really isn't. You know, we can start with baselines, and that's pretty much what all the metaverse is. You start with a baseline of something, and the community makes it something else, you know, or improves upon it or whatever. And it's all about all of us together collaborating to make things better, even the world. So how that's going to play out, it's anybody's guess. You know, I could sit here and wax philosophical for the rest of my life to the heat death of the universe, and we'll still not, you know, run out of options.
Yes. Agree,
I
man.
tell everybody it's a conversation, not an answer. That's why when I work with companies, I tell them the same thing. I go, how do we metaverse? I go, it's not an answer. There's no answer for that. There's a conversation to be had all the time.
And I don't think it's a verb either.
Yeah, I've heard it though. It's like, how do I metaverse? How do we do this metaverse thing? And I go, there is no answer. There's a conversation to be had because every context is different. Every way you want to approach it is different. What's the way that you want to approach this? I can give you, we can have a conversation and hone in on it, but there's no silver bullet. There's just the you versus the spatial computing infrastructure. How do you want to approach this in what way? And let's narrow this down. Let's have a conversation. Let's, storyboard some stuff, up with ideas, throw stuff against the wall, see what happens, right? And we can refine it from a bigger picture. And companies want, like, for whatever reason, they want like direct answers, like the exact thing at all times. And they go, you don't. Like, even I don't. Like, I can come up with a nebulous idea. I can throw ideas at the wall all day if you want, but this is always got to be willing to have a conversation about what you're trying to achieve. And then we can decide whether one approach is better than the other in this ecosystem. What are you trying to, who are you trying to reach? How are you trying to reach them? Why are you trying to do it this way? What's the purpose of this? Is it, supposed to be business? Is it supposed to be consumer? Is it supposed to, educate? Is it supposed to, there's a million things that happen here. So it's like saying, how do I internet? There's so much stuff going on. It's like, you got to narrow that down. Are you trying to be a, Firefox? Are you trying to be Chrome? Are you trying to be the browser? Are you trying to be, HTML5? Are you trying to be Twitter? Are you trying to be Facebook? Are you trying to be a video service? What are you trying to be? Because there's a huge amount of, interneting here, in the bigger picture. Are you trying to be a smartphone maker, an app on the phone? What are you trying to be? Because all of that stuff falls under the same umbrella. And it's such a wide swath of things that you go, this is a conversation at all times. There is no such thing as straight answer. You're just, and how would you like to do that?
Right.
How would you like to approach this?
Yes, agree. There's so many different layers and, like you said, wide swath. Some people's answer is Walmart land.
Walmart land, or let's make a virtual world, or let's open a giant store in Decentraland or something. And I go, yeah, isn't one of those places, they have like 30 or 30 users and 30 concurrent users, and it was like worth 1 point something billion in valuation. I had like a currency in 24 hours of like 30 people. And I'm like, I think your investors have overvalued what you've got because there's nobody home. It's just a wasteland of virtual worlds. And I go, missing the point, right? I think in the same way, I say that, cryptocurrency and NFTs aren't necessarily the future. It's not like the biggest thing in the world, but it is a thing. And it is definitely important to the overall metaverse. But I also say that not everything is special. Just like you say, at the end of the day, not everything is unique. Not everything should be. There are unique things that need to be protected. There are unique things that have value that are limited edition. But not everything. Not everything needs to be NFT'd into the ground. I say there's a common place for every technology. If you have a one-of-one artwork, that's NFT. If you have, a utility or an experience that's a one night only kind of ticket, that's an NFT. If you got, a couch, okay, maybe it's not. Maybe everybody needs access to the couch and you have infinite copies of the couch and you can buy it. It's just everything is a moment of everything in the metaverse is a moment of what actually applies and what doesn't in context to what you're trying to achieve. And there's plenty of technology, there's plenty of routes to do that. But the conversation is always there. And that's what matters most, is having the conversation.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that we had this conversation today. Well, I mean, you're legend in my mind in this space and in real life too. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Your words have been inspiring, super intelligent, and inspirational for all mankind out there. So thank you so much. Well, I appreciate your time.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.